Mara always thought she understood the people she loved, her friends, her family, and especially her partner David. Their relationship had been built on trust, shared experiences, and unspoken understandings. But as the years passed, Mara began to notice something subtle, then undeniable: a shift in David's behavior. It started with small things: late-night work calls, brief moments of disconnection, and vague responses when she asked about his day. At first, she brushed it off as stress, or perhaps the natural ebb and flow of a long-term relationship. But the cracks deepened. His smile no longer reached his eyes, and there were times when Mara felt like she was grasping at air when she reached for his hand. One evening, after another particularly strange conversation, Mara decided to take a deep dive into the growing sense of unease that had gnawed at her for months. It wasn't just the changes in David's demeanor that bothered her, it was the emotional distance. The intimacy had faded, and in its place was a chasm of unspoken words and ignored gestures. That night, while David was out for another one of his work meetings, Mara found herself rifling through his things, something she had never imagined herself doing. But the weight of the secrets he was carrying was too heavy to ignore. Her hands trembled as she sifted through his jacket pocket, finding a crumpled receipt for a luxury hotel in a nearby city. Her heart pounded as she read the name of a woman, Claire, who had been staying in the same hotel on the same night. The receipt was only the beginning. There were messages, long, intimate messages that hinted at more than just a professional relationship. Her mind spun with disbelief, her emotions a whirlwind of anger, sadness, and betrayal. It wasn't just that David had been unfaithful, although that was a raw wound. It was the emotional attachment he had formed with someone else. The messages showed the depth of his feelings for Claire, feelings that seemed to mirror the connection they once shared, and that realization cut deeper than any affair ever could. When David came home that night, Mara confronted him. The silence between them was suffocating as she held up the evidence. His face went pale, and the air around them thickened with guilt and shame. David confessed first reluctantly, then with a growing sense of remorse. He admitted to the affair, but insisted it wasn't just about physical attraction. It had been an emotional connection, one that had begun innocently enough but soon became something more. The conversations with Claire had started as work-related, but over time they had become something he couldn't ignore. As David spoke, Mara felt the weight of her own emotional attachment to him crumble. She had always thought their relationship was solid, a partnership built on understanding and mutual respect. But now, it felt like the foundation of their love had been eroded, piece by piece, by the lies and hidden emotions. David tried to explain, but words felt hollow. "I never wanted to hurt you," he said, but Mara wasn't sure if she could believe him anymore. How could he claim not to want to hurt her when he had let himself be swept away by another person's words and affection? The days following the confrontation were some of the hardest of Mara's life. The emotional fallout was immense, not just from the affair itself, but from the realization that her connection with David had been fractured beyond repair. It wasn't just about the betrayal, it was about the emotional abandonment she felt. David hadn't just cheated physically, he had emotionally detached from her, leaving her to face the silence that grew between them. They went through therapy, but the cracks in their relationship were too deep. Mara began to understand that the emotional bond she had cherished had been chipped away by David's neglect, and the affair had been the catalyst for a realization she couldn't ignore. She deserved someone who would prioritize her, someone who would honor their bond above all else. The emotional complexity of their situation lingered long after they separated. Mara still grappled with the idea that she had given so much of herself to someone who had, in the end, found solace in another person's words. But she also learned to rebuild her sense of self, recognizing that her worth was not tied to the approval or affection of someone who could so easily turn away. Both David and Mara were left with the scars of their choices. The affair wasn't just about physical infidelity, it was about emotional betrayal, the quiet unraveling of a love that had once seemed unbreakable. And as Mara moved forward, she learned that sometimes the hardest part of an affair isn't the act itself, it's the emotional detachment that leads to it.